Order, order. Thank you for joining us today. This is our third E-Petition session, which we've scheduled to give members from across the House an opportunity to discuss stamp duty land tax relief during the COVID-19 outbreak. Sessions like this would normally take place in Westminster Hall, but due to the suspension of sittings, we've started holding these sessions as an alternative way to consider the issues raised by petitions and present them to government. And holding today's session virtually means that members who are shielding or self-isolating and are therefore generally unable to take part in Westminster Hall to date are able to participate today. I'm also pleased that the official opposition has fielded a frontbench speaker, that we have a minister to attend the session and respond to the points that members raise, as we would in Westminster Hall. So order, order, and I invite Elliot Coburn to open today's session.
Thank you very much, Chair. And to remind colleagues, today we're discussing E-Petition 550545, entitled Extend the Stamp Duty Holiday for an Additional 6 months after the 31st of March 2021. To begin with the prayer of this petition, it states, and I quote, that extending the stamp duty holiday for an additional 6 months will assist many buyers who are looking to move to a property that they will not be able to afford otherwise. This will help stabilise the housing market. I am looking to move into a new build, which will currently have to complete by the start of March 2021. However, if the build is delayed past this date, I will not be able to afford the stamp duty and ultimately not be able to afford the house. To date, around 138,000 people have signed this petition, including 413 people from my own Carshalton and Wallington constituency. And before continuing, I'd like to also note the huge interest that there has been in this petition. During my time in the petitions committee, I don't think I've had so many emails or phone calls from either affected petitioners, the press, or indeed colleagues before we've come to this discussion. So it's a shame that we couldn't have it a bit more formally, but I think it's important that we got this petition in before the 31st of March deadline, so that the Minister, who's kindly come along today to hear this debate, has a chance to hear our concerns and respond. Now, there is a temptation, I'll admit, to want to talk about the merits or otherwise of stamp duty as a tax as a whole. Indeed, I do question whether or not this tax does have a future, given that it often acts as a barrier to home ownership, as people scrimp and save for a deposit, only to be met with thousands more pounds worth of stamp duty to pay, and consequently could delay getting their first fit on the property ladder. However, I appreciate that we are in a time of pandemic and that the Treasury will want to ensure that its budget can see us past this pandemic. So it may not be looking at a total restructure of the tax system more broadly right now, so I will keep to the specifics of the asks in the petition. The stamp duty holiday was enormously welcome and helped to keep fluidity in the housing market even during the pandemic. Indeed, many who have contacted me have spoken of an influx of buyers and sellers as a direct result of the stamp duty holiday. Now, we don't have the data and we cannot be absolutely sure of the effect that the stamp duty holiday has had on the market, but we do have strong indicators to suggest that it has indeed led to something of a boom. HMRC published its most recent data on monthly property transactions on the 21st of January, and the headline statistic from those was that the provisionally seasonally adjusted estimate of UK residential transactions in December 2020 was 129,400, nearly 32% higher than that time last year. The Financial Times also reported on the 4th of December, and I quote, that the UK housing boom continued to bolster the construction sector in November despite the autumn's double-dip economic downturn, with builders reporting the fastest expansion of orders in more than 6 years. Now, of course, not all of this will solely come down to the tax holiday, but an educated guess would certainly indicate that this has helped contribute at least to confidence in the market. However, this has had a number of consequences and led to a situation where many, like those petitioners, could face out on losing on this holiday and face a hefty tax bill that they cannot afford at the end because their sales will not complete by the 31st of March. Indeed, Mr. Steele, who started this petition, tells me that he is looking at a £12,000 liability for stamp duty if this sale does not complete. This is unaffordable for him, and the sale will ultimately fall through if it is not completed. Now, the assertion has been supported by many lenders, solicitors and estate agents who have been in touch with me, and I'm sure many colleagues as well, since we announced that this debate was taking place. that due to the unprecedented demand on their services to complete transactions by the 31st of March deadline, they are unable to keep up with demand, keep up with the pressure, and will ultimately mean that many will miss out. Indeed, one lender, Paragon, did share some really alarming statistics with me. They agreed that many prospective buyers had budgeted on the basis that they will be able to take advantage of this tax break. But Paragon's data from its customer survey that it recently showed of those in the mortgage pipeline showed that almost 2/3 of customers are dependent or have another buyer dependent somewhere else in the chain who are dependent on completion by the current deadline. The customers surveyed represent a property transaction total of nearly £1.5 billion. If prospective buyers who are dependent on completion by the 31st of March deadline find themselves unable to do so, the result will inevitably be an unprecedented volume of demand for withdrawals, disrupting chains and the wider residential purchase market on a massive scale. Again, going back to Paragon's data that they shared with me, they suggest that 51% of cases could collapse if the March deadline isn't met. However, the wider effect on the market is likely to be much higher than that, as each individual case has the potential to have a knock-on effect to others throughout the chain. Even more concerning, 42% say that they would unlikely to be able to continue with the purchase of the property at all if they couldn't take advantage of the stamp duty holiday. And this rises to nearly half when we look at those who are personally dependent on completion. So the impact on the market clearly could be substantial. But there's finally an element of fairness, I think, in all of this, with prospective buyers beginning their house buying journey in good faith, budgeting for this tax break, who could no longer qualify through essentially no fault of their own. Consequently, I would agree that with the petitioners and urge the government to look to extend the stamp duty holiday. And there are many ways the government could do this. It could reset the deadline to a new arbitrary date. It could explore the possibility of allowing transactions that begin before the 31st of March to be eligible only. It could set a new date and begin to taper off the relief by eligibility of house price each month. It could maintain the stamp duty threshold of £500,000 permanently, which is something that the Taxpayers Alliance, for example, have called for. However, if a permanent change to stamp duty isn't on the Treasury's outlook, especially during a time of pandemic, then I would argue that a phased and tapered winding down of the relief would probably be the most preferable option. This would help the market not suffer any overnight shocks like the one that it could incur on the 31st of March if the relief isn't extended. But I hope colleagues who are taking part in today's debate will expand a bit more about what they believe their solution should be. Finally, I'm grateful that the Minister has given time to come along and respond to this debate.
it was the time-limited aspect of the measure which drove that increase. This year was announced when the policy itself was first introduced. Now, Madam Chair, I've already said that I absolutely understand people's frustration of colleagues regarding the forthcoming deadline on the stamp duty land tax holiday. But as honourable members well know, I cannot comment on tax policy outside a fiscal event. Let me, however, just pick up some of the points that have been made by colleagues in this debate. The member for Carshalton and Wallington, introducing the debate, made the important point that the focus should be on the holiday, and that was the cause of the petition, rather than on the wider policy itself, on which there is much further discussion that people have had, and I think he was right about that. The Honourable for Hornsey and Wood Green was right to focus on the extent to which a buoyant housing market was important for its knock-on effects. I agree with her about that, and I've highlighted them. The right honourable member for Hackney North pointed to the cyber attack that Hackney Council has felt, and she will be aware that I have written to her separately in relation to this very unusual and particular event. The member for Richmond Park, I think uniquely amongst the those who spoke, highlighted the tax costs of the policy and, as she said, flagged the considerable sums of money involved. And the member for Erith and Thamesmead, in responding for the opposition, focused on the effect of completion. I would remind her that the legislation includes not merely completion, but the idea of substantial performance, and that is itself is a legally recognised term. So, having said that, Madam Chair, let me conclude by thanking members for their contributions today on their own behalves and on behalf of their constituents, and thanking the thousands of people who signed the petition. The government will continue, as it always does, to listen carefully to representations from the industry and from those who are themselves planning to buy or sell a property.
Thank you, Minister. I now call Elliot to give us the winding up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for responding, and to all members and right honourable members for their contributions to this debate. I think it's fair to say we've had a lot of views, although a rare moment of unity amongst three political parties in highlighting problems with the tax. I suspect we have very different ideas about how to reform stamp duty, but a rare moment of unity that we seem to agree that stamp duty land tax needs a longer term look at. But again, as I said in my opening statement, I appreciate that this might not be the moment in the middle of a pandemic that the Treasury wants to do that assessment. So I hope that the Minister has found our contributions useful today and will industries the way well. So, everyone useful as well, and can I thank Chair, you and the committee for allowing us to have get it in before the deadline, so thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you very much for leading the debate, being so disciplined with your time, and my congratulations are added also to you, Greg, for much to the broadcasters and to Hansard for accommodating this not to the Labour front bench, and to the Minister for responding to the concerns raised by members today. Order.
has ended. The proceeding 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 has ended.